Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Hefner. I'm a captain with the 86 IBC Team Mountain, part of the Vermont Army National Guard, and also an AUP partner with 10th Mountain Division. I'm currently a troop commander and the assistant S3 Monday through Friday. I'm a true believer in our mountain mission and the cold weather mission and our need to develop Arctic and cold weather proficiency in the extreme cold conditions. I've participated in Exercise Guerre Nordique, which is a Canadian DISCA mission, since 2015, and since 2016 I've been the U.S. OIC. It is a Canadian 2nd Division mission that's usually run in the far north. In these roles I've had the opportunity to work in extreme cold, both down here in Vermont where it gets very cold and also in the far north with the Canadians. I was asked to share my experiences with this group by Ms. James. Unfortunately, I couldn't join you in person because I am currently on a mission with the 109th Airlift Wing to alert Canada, part of their exercise, Polar Reach. And we're going north in order to gain a better understanding of their capabilities vis-a-vis their C-130s that are able to land on skis. We're hoping to develop both the U.S. and Canadian Arctic proficiency. So Ms. James asked me to detail kind of what we do when we're in the north to give the science and technology folks a better idea of how to direct their efforts. The reality is that the greatest inhibitor to training proficiency at the moment in the Arctic is training time. I suspect that's true across the board in all of our different warfighting functions, but we get very little time as a cold weather unit to actually train on cold weather tasks. The active duty and the National Guard alike are locked into the SRM cycle, and the vast majority of our available time is spent training on the specific METs that were assigned by DA. Northern units do train in cold weather, and at times it's very cold, but with limited exceptions, the cold weather is treated as a condition and not an operation. If the U.S. Army intends to develop true cold weather proficiency, it must begin to view cold weather operations, and specifically Arctic operations, as an operation, not a condition. Similar to airborne and air assault operations, it should be a new DA MET in order to focus our brigade's attention in that area. In order to become proficient in extreme cold weather, you have to spend time in extreme cold weather. And realistically, the only way to do that is to have it incorporated into our yearly training cycle. And I think the best way to do that is by making it a MET for units like the 86 IBCT and 10th Mountain Division. So a quick overview of what we do on Operation Guerre Nordique, and in general the way that the Canadians I've been exposed to operate. Everything in the far north and even in their subarctic rotations is based around a 10-man team, a tent team. The tent, the heating apparatus, the fuel, the food, and the ice, which is used for water, is all loaded onto an Akio sled. When we're doing a subarctic rotation, that sled is towed by 2 people in the front and a single person in the back using the push bar. But the entire 10-man team operates out of one Akio sled. When we go to the far north, the vast majority of movements are all conducted by snowmobile, and that same Akio sled, which is the basis for the team, is loaded into what's called a kamatik, or a toboggan, and that's towed behind the snowmobile. Each of the 4 to 5 snowmobiles in that tent team has a kamatik that tows a variety of different things, including fuel and extra food, ice, and a variety of other things, and the Akio sled is one of the things towed behind. A couple of the principal things that I've noticed as deficiencies or capabilities gaps. The clothing in general, the 7-layer system is effective and it works. However, there's quite a bit that could be improved on that system for use in the far north. I understand from a financial point of view, the Army likes to purchase the same kit for every soldier across the board. I think for northern units, they should probably make an exception and seek to purchase them a kit that's a little bit more that's better suited to the extreme cold and the far north. So the basic EQUIC system works. The jacket, level 7, is not overly functional. I would recommend that we put more pockets both on the outside so that it looks similar to the old field jacket, and a significant number of additional pockets on the inside that are capable of holding our electronics. Radios, GPS devices, etc. will need to stay within the protection of that jacket in order to prevent them from freezing when you get to negative 35 or colder. Additionally, I am a big fan of fur. When you go north, you'll find that all of the Inuits, the Inuit Rangers, and the Canadians that have been through the Arctic Advisor course, all of them wear coyote fur or some type of dog fur in a ruff on the hood of their jacket. Our current EQUIC system doesn't allow for us to zip on and zip off hoods. I would recommend that we come up with a design that allows us to zip on a coyote ruffed hood, and also that the hood itself is insulated. Ours is currently designed to tuck up under the collar. You wouldn't be able to do that if you had an insulated hood, but an insulated hood is critically important. And again, I think that we should be looking to mimic what the people who live up there and operate in that environment on a regular basis do, and they wear fur on their hood of their jacket. Another one is boots. Boots are a tricky one. We have gone through a variety of different boots. There are a couple of different boots in the system that are adequate. Muckluck, the Airboss Extreme Muckluck works quite well. The VB boot, the newer VB boot that 10th Mountain has issued, works quite well. I think if we're directing our energy towards something, a layering system for boots would be a good endeavor. There is no one boot that's going to fit each requirement. For example, the person who is fueling snowmobiles and is stationary all day may need a different boot than the line units, the reconnaissance units, and the infantry who are out pushed forward and may have need to climb up over an ice wall and will be marching for longer periods or moving for longer periods than those people. So some kind of a system that allows for the fact that a fueler and a reconnaissance scout might need different footwear at different times would be in everybody's best interest, and I think pay dividends when operating in this environment. Gloves and mitts. Gloves don't work in that cold of an environment. Instead, what's generally seen are thick mitts, preferably the gauntlet type that go all the way up your arm, with a variety of different contact gloves worn underneath. That's been the most effective system that I've worn in my time doing it, and I think is probably the one that makes the most sense moving forward. The Army, I believe, currently issues, I know our unit does, and I know 10th Mountain does, currently issues an OR system, and that system is very good and works very well. One of the things that I've been playing with and thinking about is insulation, and I know that this is probably an area that the science and technology people have been looking at as well. The loft insulation that we currently use is great. It's light, it's very effective, and it works. However, if we were to try and wear body armor underneath that, we would probably sweat profusely, and if we were to put body armor over the top of it, it will lose its insulatory values. So I'm sure that there's an insulation out there that is already compressed or that can be compressed and still provide the level of protection that a loft would, and perhaps that could be placed in the areas that would need to accept body armor. But as we think about a fight in the far north, at the moment, all the operations that I've been on with the Canadians, we don't wear body armor for those reasons. And that's an area where the science and technology people could certainly contribute to making the soldier's life better and improving lethality and survivability. Another area that we differ very greatly from with the Canadians, and I think that the Canadians have a better handle on it than us, is heat sources. We in the 86 IBCT, and I believe in 10th Mountain Division as well, currently rely on the Space Heater Arctic, or the SHA. It's a great fuel, or it's a great stove. It definitely does a very effective job of keeping the tent warm, and the new HDT tent, 10-man tent, was designed around that heat source. At least it appears to have been. However, when the weight of the SHA is approximately 50 pounds, And in order to run for a night, you have to have 5 gallons of diesel for that stove. We typically move with 2 days of supply, which means you've got to take 10 gallons of diesel, as well as this 50-pound stove, which is also quite bulky. So the approximate weight is around 122 pounds just for your heat source. And given that the size, the bulk of those two items, when they're placed in an Akio sled, it tends to make it top heavy and easier to tip. And the same heating capability can be accomplished the way that the Canadians do it, which is certainly not as technologically advanced. Generally on the missions that I'm on with the Canadians, we do bring an SHA if we're traveling by snowmobile, because we have 4 of those Capt trailers to put stuff in. But the way that we generally operate is with a 2-burner Coleman stove, a multi-fuel that burns naphtha. We use a Whisper Light MSR and a Coleman lantern. Those 3 alone will heat the tent to a temperature that is desirable in the tent, which is not actually that warm because you're sleeping in a floorless tent. But the stove itself, the Coleman, weighs about 14 pounds. A Whisper Light weighs next to nothing. And a Coleman lantern weighs probably 3 or 4 pounds. Those 3 fuel sources can run off 1 gallon of naphtha for 2 days. So you're shedding about 90 pounds worth of weight in using those fuel sources. The drawback is that it produces a heck of a lot more CO2. There is no stovepipe for any one of those. And there's an added danger and a risk with open flame. Those risks are fairly easily mitigated. There's a fire guard who spends his entire night melting ice to make water. And it's a job that is incredibly serious wherein you're in those conditions. And the CO2 level this year, I took up an industrial carbon monoxide reader that we varied somewhere between 35 and 25 parts per million, which is at the higher end of what OSHA likes to see, but is certainly tolerable. And again, if we're talking about conducting dismounted operations in that environment, shedding 90 pounds is an incredible benefit to the line soldiers that will be moving around. One of the things that I've been told you are working on in the science and technology area is food, the MREs. We in the 86 IBCT, and I believe it's the same for 10th Mountain Division, have summer MREs and we have winter MREs, and we've taken both to the far north. The problem that we have with Mountain House type meals or our winter MREs is that they require about 3 times the amount of water that we would normally use, which was a burden to our Canadian partners in the past, so we switched and began just using their rations. The food sort of ties into their system for heating. What they do instead of pouring boiling water into a winter MRE or a Mountain House type meal is they take a regular summer MRE and place the main meal into a pressure cooker, which requires about an inch of water on the bottom and maybe a couple handfuls of snow, and we pressure cook those MREs so that the soldiers are getting a hot meal. We've tried to do that on an SHA stove, and it doesn't get hot enough to actually make the pressure cooker work. So the only way to do that is with the Coleman stove. I suppose you could do it on the Whisper Light as well. We haven't tried that. But either way, that system combined with the way, that they feed their meals works very well, and it's extremely effective, and you aren't going through the same amount of water. With regard to water, the Canadians, I suspect, decided long ago that trying to prevent water from freezing in that climate was an exercise in futility. And what they've done instead is they take a cardboard box that's probably 6 by 6 and place a thicker than average plastic bag inside of it, pour water into it, and freeze them. They're easily stackable in the back of one of these Camatiques or an Akio sled. And you have a fire guard up for obvious reasons with the heat source that they're using. The fire guard's second mission is to chip blocks of that, or chip pieces of ice off of that block and melt it. The fire guard shifts are usually an hour. They rotate the entire way through the tent, and everyone, regardless of rank, does fire guard shift. And you spend your fire guard shift making sure that no one catches on fire or burns the tent down, and making water for the following day. Water generally does better. In fact, camelbacks are not allowed on the mission for obvious reasons. They pop all the time, and if one pops and gets you wet, you're going to have a problem. Canteens, because of the narrow neck, are not acceptable either, and what we generally take are hydro flasks, which are better insulated than a typical Nalgene bottle. A typical Nalgene bottle will work. They're placed upside down in a thermos container so that they freeze at the bottom and not at the mouth. And the fire guard spends all night refilling those Nalgene bottles. Excuse me. The other thing that the Canadians do with food that we don't, or at least I've not seen it in my career, is the Canadian rations include a snack pack. When you're moving by snowmobile or even dismounted dragging the Accio, you stop frequently. Everything moves slowly in the far north. And at every rest stop, you drink water and eat something sugary and something with protein. So their packets, these rations that they hand out to people for consumption during the day, the between meal ration, I suppose, contains things like Tootsie Rolls or Snickers bars or Starbursts or something sugary. And they always have some kind of beef jerky or pepperoni stick. And every Canadian soldier and every American soldier that I've been around supplements that by buying their own candy before we go. It is amazing the difference that it makes when you pop a Snickers into your mouth after your feet have been exposed to negative 35 with a 30-mile-an-hour wind at least riding a snowmobile. It instantly brings the feeling back. Sugar can't be overrated. Another solution that some people like is to put Jello packs in their water. I'm not a big fan of that, but it works. It's very sugary and it has the same effect. So I would like to see us develop some kind of a snack pack that people can nibble on when they're moving during the extreme cold in the far north. Radios and communication is another obstacle. The Canadians have purchased a new Motorola radio that is far more resistant to the cold than the radios that are currently issued to us, in part because it doesn't have an LCD screen. So our 152s and our 148s have an LCD screen. If those are, or liquid crystal I think is LCD, if those are exposed to negative 35 for more than about 5 minutes, that liquid crystal freezes and the radio is useless. Obviously you don't want to leave your radio lying around, and it should be stowed inside your jacket. But radios like the ASIP and the 150, those radios would not likely fit inside your jacket and would be towed in a kamatik or in someone's backpack, and they'll freeze. So coming up with the insulation that I talked about before, or some way of keeping those, particularly the man-pack radios as opposed to the squad-type radios, warm is critically important. And I don't honestly know what the solution to that is, but I'm sure that the science and technology people can figure something out for that. Other electronics like the Dagger, NVGs actually do fairly well, but nothing survives negative 35 for very long. So NVGs, the LRAS 3, we haven't tried to take that up there, or a PAS 13. Any of those things are going to struggle with an extended period outside, and most of those are too large to fit in your jacket. So we need to come up with some means of keeping the batteries for those devices, and if they use an LCD screen, the device itself warm when we're trying to use them in negative 35 or below. Medical supplies is another issue. Things like IV bags and a variety of other things, vials of medication, all of that stuff is obviously a challenge in the far north. One of the issues that we face in the far north is Casevac and Medevac. There are significant periods of time where you won't be able to get a helicopter in because the weather is terrible. This last trip I was on, we were stranded for 4 days in the village we were in because we couldn't get an aircraft in to get us back out. We were blessed during the mission. No one got injured, and the weather was good enough that helicopters were easily flying during that time, but it could quite easily have gone the other way. So developing a way for us to keep medical supplies warm, I would imagine whatever you come up with would probably work for the radios and for these medical supplies to keep them warm. Either way, we don't yet have that solution that I'm aware of. So In closing, operating in the far north is extremely difficult and challenging, and it's far different to the way we operate here. In Vermont, it gets very cold. I have definitely been out in negative 25. That's probably the coldest I've been out here. And the soldiers at Fort Drum also drill in cold. It's not the same as negative 35. It's not the same as being on a barren ice sheet and trying to accomplish these missions. If we mean to become proficient in Arctic warfare, if we mean to be a valuable ally to the Canadians, should they need us in the far north or anywhere else where we have extreme cold weather, then we need to train in that weather. The gadgets and the gizmos are all going to be very helpful, and we will need to train on those specifically in those conditions in order to become a proficient fighting force in the Arctic or in the extreme cold weather. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing the developments in the science and technology field in the years to come. Thank you.